Mr. Diallo, stop. The room goes quiet so fast you can hear the projector fan. Malik freezes halfway through his sentence, one hand still lifted toward the slide behind him. He is 20 minutes into the biggest presentation of the semester. 30% of his grade. One faculty recommendation tied to it. One fellowship tied to that recommendation. And that fellowship is the only reason he can afford to stay at Stanton University next year. So when Professor Richard Halpern cuts him off in front of 32 students, Malik doesn't just hear interruption. He hears the sound of a door starting to close. Halpern folds his arms. Then he says, if your audience has to fight through your accent to understand your point, the point is already weaker. Nobody moves. Not at first. Then a couple students glance down. One guy in the back lets out a tiny breath that sounds almost like a laugh. And if you've ever had someone embarrass you in a room where you cannot afford to react, you know what happens next. Your face gets hot. Your throat tightens. Your hands suddenly feel visible. Malik stands there in a navy sweater and a borrowed tie, with a slide on diplomatic language glowing behind him, while the man teaching global persuasion and public voice tells the whole room that the way he speaks is the problem. Not what he said. How he sounds. And the worst part? Halpern says it like he's helping. This is not personal, the professor adds, adjusting his glasses. This is about clarity. That line lands like a clean knife. Because now, if Malik looks hurt, he looks immature. If he gets angry, he confirms every lazy assumption waiting in the room. And if he says nothing, the silence starts sounding like agreement. The clock above the whiteboard reads 11:14. The fellowship interview panel meets at 4. Halpern is supposed to submit one final evaluation before then. 1. Malik needs that evaluation. Without it, there is no recommendation. Without the recommendation, there is no Global Leaders Fellowship. Without the fellowship, there is a $12,000 gap he absolutely does not have. And if he can't close that gap, he doesn't come back next semester. It is that simple. So when Professor Halpern humiliates him over his accent, this is not just a classroom moment. It is a threat. Malik forces his fingers to loosen around the presentation remote. He feels 32 pairs of eyes, 32 different kinds of silence. The sympathetic silence. The relieved silence from people glad it isn't them. The curious silence from people who love tension as long as they are not inside it. He swallows once, then says as evenly as he can, "Would you like me to continue, Professor?" That surprises Halpern. Because he expected apology. Embarrassment. Maybe a stumble. What he gets instead is control. Yes, Halpern says. Continue, but slower. And try to sound less translated. That one lands even harder. Less translated. A few students actually wince. One girl in the second row, Sophia Ramirez, lifts her head sharply like she can't believe she heard it. Malik nods once, turns back to the screen, and keeps going. Because right now, survival matters more than dignity. At least that's what he tells himself. What nobody in that classroom knows yet, what Halpern definitely does not know yet, is that Malik Diallo has spent half his life translating worlds for other people. And by the end of the week, the man who mocked his accent is going to learn exactly how many. Malik Diallo is 21, an international relations major, and the kind of student professors praise in email threads more than they praise out loud. Sharp papers. Perfect citations. Never late. Never messy. Never the loudest person in the room. He is from Dakar, Senegal. He grew up in a home where Wolof moved through the kitchen, French ran the classroom, Arabic sat beside prayer, and English arrived early enough to matter. Later, Spanish came too. Not as a party trick. As work. As use. As another bridge he learned to build because life kept handing him people who needed one. By the time he gets to Stanton on scholarship money and family courage, he speaks 5 languages fluently. 5. Not can get by. Not knows a few phrases. Fluently. But he almost never leads with that. Because people hear 5 languages and stop seeing a person. They start seeing a performance, a headline, a novelty. And Malik is tired of being treated like something impressive, only after first being treated like something less. So he keeps it quiet. He lets people discover only what they care enough to ask. The problem is, a lot of people never ask. They hear the edges of his English, its Senegalese shape, its French rhythm, the way certain vowels arrive from somewhere older than America, and they decide the story before he finishes the sentence. Professor Richard Halpern is one of those people. You can feel it the first week of class. Not because he says anything outrageous, because he says the wrong things too comfortably. A girl from Seoul gives an answer, and he tells her, "Strong point. Be careful not to hide it inside your cadence." A student from Brazil mispronounces one idiom, and Halpern smiles like, "A correction is a gift." Then Carter Mills speaks clean haircut, polished jawline, campus politician confidence, and Halpern never interrupts him once. That is how authority works when it trusts itself. It sounds like patience. Students want Halpern's approval because it opens doors. You can see it in the room. When he nods, people sit taller. When he frowns, people start editing themselves in real time. He doesn't need to announce his reputation. The class already behaves like he can change their future. That's what makes him dangerous. Not volume, gravity. And Malik has been enduring him for 13 weeks because the Global Leaders Fellowship does not just come with money. It comes with housing, a summer research placement in Geneva, and a promise, however fragile, that Malik will not have to call home and tell his mother the scholarship wasn't enough after all. His mother, Isatu, has never said the word sacrifice in a dramatic tone. She doesn't do dramatic. She does exact. Exact rent. Exact school fees. Exact bus times. Exact amounts of rice stretched across exact numbers of days. When Malik got into Stanton, she stood in their apartment in Dakar with the acceptance letter in one hand and the calculator in the other and said, "This is beautiful. It is also impossible. So now we will make it less impossible." That is how his family loves. Not with speeches. With mathematics? His uncle sold an old motorbike. His mother borrowed carefully from 2 relatives she trusted, and 1 she did not. Malik won merit aid, travel support, and 1 emergency grant he only got because he wrote an essay so honest it hurt to reread. He arrived in the U.S. with 1 suitcase, 1 winter coat that was not warm enough, and a private agreement with himself. He would not waste this. He would not fail because someone thought he sounded different. He would not become homesick enough to make his mother's courage look foolish. So he works. Library desk 3 nights a week. Language lab weekends. Occasional interpreting for a community legal clinic off campus. He studies like panic is a scheduling system. And mostly, it works. Mostly. Until Halpern. At first, the comments are small enough to dismiss. Enunciate that again. Too much melody there. American audiences prefer less ornament in the voice. Then they get sharper. Your written analysis is stronger than your delivery. Tone matters, Mr. Diallo. Familiarity matters. That last word hangs around. Familiarity. A tidy way of saying, you do not sound like what power expects. Malik tells himself, it's fine. He tells himself, professors are blunt. He tells himself he can survive 1 difficult class. But by the middle of October, even speaking feels like walking into a test he did not design. And the worst part? The room is learning from it. Students start speaking over him faster. Start paraphrasing his points in smoother, safer voices. Start hearing hesitation in him that wasn't there before. Halpern taught them to listen for it. That afternoon, after the presentation disaster, people pack up fast. Nobody wants to be the first person who has to decide what to say to the guy who just got professionally humiliated. Sophia catches him by the door. That was out of line, she says. Malik slides his laptop into his bag. He's the professor. That's not a defense. He gives a tired half smile. No, it's a fact. She lowers her voice. You should report it. He almost laughs. To whom? The department that bends itself around Halpern's comfort? The university that says it values global voices and still somehow only hears them properly once they sound local enough? I have the fellowship review today, Malik says. Sophia's face tightens. She knows what that means. Halpern's evaluation matters more than any complaint Malik could file before sunset. That's how power protects itself. Not with force, with timing. You still think he'll recommend you? She asks. Malik zips the bag shut. I think he knows I need him to. Sophia says nothing, because that is the ugliest sentence she's heard all week. The fellowship interview happens in a glass-walled conference room on the 4th floor of Harrington Hall. Dark wood table. Bottled water nobody opens. 3 faculty members and 1 associate dean. Halpern is not in the room, but his evaluation is, which means in some ways he's the loudest person there. Malik sits straight-backed in his only suit, palms warm against the folder on his lap. He answers every question well. Not perfectly. Well, measured, thoughtful, specific. He speaks about multilingual diplomacy, about how policy fails when institutions treat language access like an extra service instead of a foundation. He speaks about migration, education, translation as civic trust. At one point, the associate dean leans forward. Your application mentions volunteer interpreting. How many languages do you work in? Malik pauses. Not because he doesn't know, because he knows what happens when he says it. 5, he answers. The dean blinks. Fluently? Yes. Another faculty member glances down at his file, then back up. Why didn't you put that more prominently on your resume? Malik gives the smallest shrug. It felt more useful to show where I've used them than to list them like decorations. That answer lands. He feels it. It is one of the few times that day a room leans toward him instead of away. The interview ends well enough that Hope starts doing what Hope does. Making plans too early. Maybe this works. Maybe the semester turns. Maybe the humiliation was one ugly moment, not the shape of the whole thing. Then his phone buzzes as he walks back across campus. An email from the fellowship office. Thank you for your interview. Final decisions, pending receipt of 1 remaining faculty evaluation. 1 remaining evaluation. Of course. So Hope doesn't die. It tightens. And what Malik doesn't know yet is that Halpern is about to make the pressure even more personal. The next week, Halpern seems even more interested in Malik's voice. Not his ideas. His voice. During a discussion on public legitimacy, Malik makes a strong point about how institutions confuse accessibility with conformity. Halpern nods slightly, then says, Interesting, though your delivery still undercuts your credibility in an Anglo-American context. A few students shift. Carter jumps in with a shallower version of Malik's argument 10 seconds later. Halpern calls it well-framed. That's how it works. You say it first. Somebody more familiar says it second. The room finally hears it. After class, Malik goes to office hours. Not because he wants to, because he has to. Halpern's office looks exactly how power thinks it should look. Books arranged for seriousness. Awards placed at eye level. A framed panel photo big enough to say you should already know who I am. The professor gestures toward a chair. Malik sits. Halpern steeples his fingers. I assume this is about the fellowship. Yes, Professor. You interviewed already? Yes. And? I think it went well. Halpern nods. I imagine your written materials carried weight. There it is, again. That neat division. Your mind is strong. Your voice is the issue. Malik keeps his face still. I wanted to ask if you had submitted the evaluation. Not yet. Malik waits. Halpern waits longer. A small lesson in hierarchy. Finally, he says, I have concerns. About my work? About your presentation as a representative of the university. Malik says nothing. Halpern goes on. You are obviously intelligent, Mr. Diallo. No one disputes that. But elite spaces are unforgiving. People make snap judgments. You have to decide whether you want to be idealistic about that or strategic. Strategic. Another word, arriving dressed as advice. What does strategic mean here? Malik asks. Halpern leans back. It means recognizing that fluency and command are not the same thing. That one almost gets through Malik's control. Almost. Because it is such a clean insult. So efficiently insulting that part of the room itself seems to admire it. What are you saying? Malik asks. Halpern does not hesitate. I'm saying that if you want my strongest recommendation, you need to show me that when you speak, people listen to your ideas before they notice your accent. Malik looks at him for a long second. And if they notice my accent first? Halpern holds his gaze. Then your ideas arrive second. The room goes very quiet. Not because anyone else is there, because some sentences echo even before they leave the mouth. Malik stands. Not abruptly. Carefully. He thanks the professor for his time and walks out of the office with the exact posture of someone trying not to let anger show on his back. In the hallway, Sophia is waiting with 2 coffees from a machine that should legally be investigated. She holds one up. For the brave. He takes it. This smells like burned homework. It tastes worse. You're welcome. He almost smiles. Almost. That helps more than either of them says. But it still doesn't change what Halpern just did. That night, Malik is at Street Catherine's community clinic helping a volunteer attorney explain asylum paperwork to a Congolese family. The mother speaks French. The father speaks French and some Arabic. Their oldest daughter prefers English because she learned it fast. The youngest child is crying because hospitals sound frightening in every language. The attorney is overwhelmed. The father keeps misunderstanding one line about legal residency and thinking it means immediate deportation. Malik steps in. Not dramatically. Calmly. He shifts into French, then English, then Arabic, then back again. Voice steady. Face open. No performance. No ego. Just meaning carried carefully. By the end of the night, the mother grips his hand and says in French, "When you speak, people stop feeling lost." Well, Malik thanks her and says nothing about it after. Because for him, language has never been about showing off. It has always been about rescue. Small rescue. Human rescue. The kind that happens sentence by sentence. Outside the clinic, Sophia is sitting on the front steps with another vending machine coffee. He stops. You again? She hands him the cup. This one might only be a misdemeanor. He snorts. That is the first real laugh he has had all week. They sit in the cold while traffic moves past the clinic. After a minute, she says, Dr. Lina Moreno is inside. Malik frowns. The language center director? Sophia nods. She helps coordinate interpreters for these clinics. He stiffens slightly. Sophia notices. You never told anyone you do this. It's work. It's impressive. It's work. She studies him. Then says quietly, Is that why you never correct people when they act like your accent means you struggle with English? Malik stares out at the street. People who decide you are less capable rarely become more reasonable because you hand them extra facts. Sophia lets that sit. Then says, Halpern should know. Malik looks at the paper cup in his hands. No. Why not? Why not? Because I don't want him to suddenly respect me for sounding exceptional. I wanted him to respect me when he thought I was ordinary. That shuts the conversation down for a second. Because it's not just smart. It hurts. The week of the symposium, pressure stacks fast. Malik still hasn't heard about the fellowship. Halpern still hasn't submitted the evaluation. And now the professor announces that selected students from the seminar will participate in the Stanton Global Communication Symposium on Friday. One student will moderate a live diplomatic case simulation in front of alumni, faculty, and visiting delegates. Prestige. Visibility. Another line on the fellowship file. Halpern announces it like a gift. We'll treat this as a real-world test, he says. Composure, verbal clarity, control of the room. Then his eyes rest on Malik for half a second too long. You'll all have a chance to demonstrate what makes a voice persuasive. The practice rounds begin that day. Students deliver 2-minute openings for a fictional negotiation. Carter goes first. Confident, generic. Sounds like every student body election poster learned to walk. Halpern calls him naturally authoritative. Then it's Malik's turn. He stands. Begins. And within 40 seconds, Halpern interrupts again. Pause. Malik stops. Your pace is improved, Halpern says, but there's still friction. Friction? In the ear. Sophia stares straight at Halpern now. What exactly does that mean? She asks. The professor turns. It means communication is auditory before it is intellectual, Miss Ramirez. Sophia doesn't blink. Or it means some listeners are lazy. The room sharpens instantly. Halpern smiles the way men like him smile when they want to look amused and not threatened. A provocative comment. A correct one. Malik wants to disappear and thank her at the same time. Halpern turns back to him. Let's continue. Though in the real world, Mr. Diallo, your advocates may not always be available. There it is. Tiny punishment. Quick enough to pass as wit. Malik finishes the opening. It's good. Actually good. Better than Carter's. Better than 2 others who go after him. But when class ends, Halpern names Carter and another student as strong early candidates for symposium leadership. Not Malik. Of course not Malik. On Thursday night, Malik is back at the clinic, translating for a Guatemalan mother whose son was suspended from school after a fight he barely understood because every meeting about it happened in English. The school administrator speaks too quickly. The mother's hands shake. The boy keeps saying in Spanish, I didn't start it, I just got tired. Malik listens, translates, reframes, does what translation really is when fear is in the room. By the end, the mother is crying quietly, the lawyer has a clear action plan, and the boy is sitting straighter because somebody finally said exactly what he meant. Malik leaves the clinic exhausted and checks his phone. Still no fellowship decision. Still no submitted evaluation. Then, at 10:40 p.m., his phone rings. Unknown campus extension. He almost ignores it. Doesn't. Malik, this is Dr. Lina Moreno from the Language Center. He sits up straighter. Yes? I'm sorry to call late. We have a problem with Friday's symposium. He says nothing. She continues. The external interpretation contractor had a medical emergency. We may not have language support for part of the event. He rubs his forehead. Okay. I asked around. Apparently you didn't think it was important to tell people you are qualified in French, Arabic, and Spanish at professional level. He closes his eyes. I didn't hide it. You absolutely hid it. Strategically. She laughs once. So you do have a sense of humor? Good. I need you there at 8:30. Formal dress. Be prepared to assist if necessary. Assist how? There is a pause. Then Dr. Moreno says, possibly by saving the event. And just like that, Friday becomes something else. Not just the day of the symposium. The day the room is going to find out what Halpern never bothered to hear. Friday morning arrives sharp and cold. Fletcher Hall is the kind of building universities use when they want importance to sound architectural. Stone columns. Polished floors. People with lanyards walking fast and whispering like urgency is part of the decor. Alumni donors cluster near the coffee station. Faculty line up their panels. Students chosen for the case simulation stand in dark suits and nervous smiles. Carter, the selected moderator, looks thrilled in the way only someone who has never been publicly underestimated can look before a high-visibility event. Malik arrives early, suit pressed, tie straight, Language Center badge clipped near his lapel. He is not on the main program. Not officially. He is there as backup support. Invisible support. The kind institutions only notice when something breaks. Dr. Moreno meets him backstage holding a folder and a phone and the exact expression of a woman carrying 3 emergencies gracefully. Thank God, she says. You called me at 10:40. And I thanked God then too. She points to the printed schedule. First keynote, visiting UNESCO advisor from Morocco. Second panel, Youth Diplomacy Roundtable with a Spanish NGO director and a Senegalese education minister attending remotely. Third segment, Student Case Simulation moderated by Carter, with Halpern presiding. Malik scans the page. Where's the fire? She gives him a look. Have you met technology? Right on cue, a staffer rushes over. The translation headsets aren't pairing. Of course they aren't. Another staffer appears. The minister's office says she may respond in French if the connection delays continue. Dr. Moreno closes her eyes for half a second, then points at Malik. He's now plan A. The staffer blinks. This student? Dr. Moreno doesn't even turn. Yes, this student. Tell whoever needs convincing to listen carefully. Still, Malik feels something tighten in his stomach. Not fear of the languages. Never the languages. Fear of visibility. Fear of what happens when a hidden thing becomes public in exactly the room that taught itself not to value it. And what he doesn't know yet is that before this morning ends, the room is going to turn so fast it almost hurts. At 9:02, Fletcher Hall fills. Halpern takes the stage to welcome everyone. Of course he does. He stands under warm lights, voice rich and practiced, every syllable shaped for authority. He speaks about communication across borders, understanding difference, the future of global dialogue. And if you were cruel, you'd laugh. Because there he is, the man who treated Malik's accent like friction, now praising global voices into a microphone. The keynote begins. Dr. Samira Ben Youssef from UNESCO joins the stage. Elegant, composed, sharper than anyone warned the faculty she'd be. The first question is in English. She answers in English. Fine. Second question, also fine. Then an alumnus in the front row asks something sprawling and self-important about post-colonial civic trust. Dr. Ben Youssef smiles politely, then begins answering in French. Not all of it. Just enough. Heads tilt. Pens stop moving. One donor glances at the dead headset in his lap like it personally betrayed him. Backstage, an event coordinator whispers, "We need help now." Dr. Moreno looks at Malik. He steps forward. No flourish. No dramatic inhale. Just work. She hands him a wireless mic. Halpern sees it happen from the stage and frowns slightly. Doctor. Moreno leans in and says something too low for the audience to hear. The confusion on Halpern's face changes, then stills. Malik walks out. If you've ever entered a room where people had already decided what category you belonged in, you know how heavy that first step can feel. He reaches the second chair, takes the mic, and says in clear English, Dr. Ben Youssef, if you prefer, I can interpret your response. She looks at him once, then answers in French, fast enough to test him. He smiles slightly, and begins. His English comes out smooth, calm, precise. No strain, no searching, no apology. He doesn't flatten himself for the room. He carries the room. Sentence by sentence, he interprets her answer about language policy, institutional dignity, and the violence of forcing populations to sound acceptable before being heard. That last phrase lands like fate. The audience is locked now. Not because it's flashy, because it's flawless. You can feel the shift move through Fletcher Hall. Attention changing shape. People who saw student helper now seeing something else entirely. Something rarer. A mind moving across languages without dropping meaning. Halpern stands half a step behind him, face unreadable. But unreadable does not mean unaffected. The keynote continues. A question comes from a visiting delegate from Madrid. Spanish. Malik answers without pause. Then the remote feed connects late from Dakar, and the Senegalese minister greets the room first in French, then unexpectedly switches into Wolof to address the importance of local language in education. Malik answers in Wolof. Just one respectful line before turning back to English for the audience. That does it. That is the moment the room breaks open. Because now this is no longer, oh, he knows a couple languages. Now it's command. Now it's range. Now it's the entire architecture of Halpern's assumption collapsing in public under stage lights. People in the audience start whispering. Not rude whispering. Stunned whispering. Faculty turn pages in their programs like maybe they missed a biography. Then the Moroccan advisor, amused now, says in Arabic, "How many languages do you hide from your professors?" A ripple of laughter moves through the room. Malik answers her in Arabic first, then in English for everyone else. She asks how many languages I hide from my professors. More laughter. Warmer now. He lets it breathe, then adds, only the ones they don't ask about. That line gets applause. Real applause. Not polite. And across the stage, Professor Halpern goes very still. Because now he is trapped inside the worst possible outcome for a man like him. Not simple correction. Exposure. After the keynote, the Associate Dean takes the mic with visible relief. For those just meeting him, that was Malik Diallo, one of our students, who works fluently in English, French, Wolof, Arabic, and Spanish. There it is. Public. Official. On record. 5 languages. Fluently. A murmur runs through the audience again. Halpern claps because he has to. Because not clapping would tell the truth too fast. Malik steps off stage to a hallway suddenly full of people who now want to know him. A development officer wants his resume. A donor says, "Remarkable." A student volunteer says, "I had no idea." That's always the strange part. The same difference that made the room uncertain becomes magnetic the second prestige touches it. Malik smiles politely through all of it, but inside, something harder is happening. Relief. Yes. Vindication. Definitely. But also anger. Because none of this changed who he was. Nothing new got created on that stage. The only thing that changed was what the room was finally willing to recognize. Halpern finds him 20 minutes later near the green room. Of course he does. That was exceptional, the professor says. Malik turns. Professor. Student. Same titles. Different air. Halpern nods once, like he is reorganizing his own memory in real time. I was not aware of the full extent of your linguistic background. Malik gives him the quietest answer possible. That was part of the problem. Halpern's jaw shifts. I hope you understand, he begins. My comments in class were about audience perception, not your intelligence. Malik almost laughs. Almost. I understood your comments perfectly, he says. Halpern lowers his voice. You should have been more forthcoming. Malik looks at him for a second. About what? About the fact that you are clearly highly skilled. There it is again. The trap. As if respect should have arrived once Malik proved he was unusually extraordinary. Malik doesn't let him have that escape. I didn't need to be exceptional to deserve respect in your classroom, he says. I only needed to be your student. That lands. Before Halpern can answer, Dr. Moreno appears beside Malik. The Spanish director wants him for the youth diplomacy panel, she says. Her tone is professional. Her timing is surgical. She turns to Malik. You're with me. He goes. And just like that, Halpern is the one left standing in silence. The youth panel goes even better. Because now, Malik relaxes. And when he relaxes, his voice stops carrying the tension of anticipated judgment. He shifts between languages when needed, summarizes with precision, moderates one exchange so smoothly that the visiting Spanish director laughs and says, You were born for this. That line almost hurts, because it lands so close to the thing Halpern tried to erase. By noon, the symposium staff has quietly replaced Carter with Malik as moderator for the afternoon simulation. No drama. No announcement framed as a correction. Just necessity, competence, and the unstoppable logic of reality. Carter corners him near the water station. So you're just taking my spot now? Malik looks more tired than triumphant. I didn't ask for your spot. Sure. End quote. The schedule changed. Convenient. Malik almost keeps walking, then stops. It wasn't convenient, he says. It was visible. Carter frowns. Malik holds his gaze. You're used to sounding right before people know if you are, he says. I'm used to proving it before they let me finish. Then he walks away. The afternoon simulation is packed. Students, faculty, donors who suddenly care a lot about multilingual communication now that it has impressed them elegantly. Halpern is seated on stage again, but not as center. Just one chair among several. Malik stands at the podium. The same man who was told 4 days ago that oral leadership might not be his lane. He opens in English. Clear. Controlled. Then, because he can, and because now he finally decides the room can do some work too, he greets the visiting delegates in French and Spanish. Nothing long. Just enough. A sign of range. A sign that global does not mean English with better branding. The simulation begins. Malik moderates sharp questions, redirects grandstanding, keeps a nervous panelist from drowning in jargon, and handles one difficult audience challenge with such calm authority that even Halpern has to nod. Halfway through, a donor asks about the burden multilingual speakers face when trying to sound persuasive in dominant language institutions. The whole room knows what just happened. That is not a neutral question. That is a door opening. Malik could answer academically. He has the theory. He has the research. Instead, he answers like someone who has lived inside it. The burden, he says, is not the accent. The burden is the listener who hears difference and calls it deficiency. Silence. Real silence. Then pens moving. People writing that down. He continues. When someone speaks more than one language, you are not hearing weakness. You are hearing history. You are hearing adaptation. You are hearing a mind carrying more than one map at once. If that makes some people uncomfortable, the problem is not in the speaker. The room is locked now. No phones. No shifting. Just attention. The fellowship email arrives at 4:17. Subject line. Congratulations. Malik sees it in the hallway outside Fletcher Hall while people are still leaving the event. He stops under a framed photo of some dead university founder and just stares. Congratulations. You have been selected as this year's Global Leaders Fellow. He reads it twice, then 3 times, then scrolls down to the award amount. $12,000. Housing supplement. Summer placement. All of it. The whole gap. Closed. His knees actually weaken a little. Real relief is physical. It comes into the body like collapse wearing good news. Sophia finds him there 2 minutes later. One look at his face and she says, "You got it." He nods. That's all he can do at first. Then laughs once, short and disbelieving. I got it. She throws her arms around him so fast, he almost drops his phone. I told you. No, you didn't. I was emotionally telling you. That's not a thing. It is now. He laughs again, fuller this time. The kind of laugh that comes after days of swallowing too much. Then a voice behind them says, Mr. Diallo. Halpern. Of course. Sophia steps back but doesn't leave. Good for her. Halpern looks older somehow. Not in years. In certainty. I submitted your evaluation this morning, he says. Malik just looks at him. I gave it my strongest recommendation. Now, in a weaker story, that would be enough. The powerful professor changes his mind. The student wins. Everyone moves on. But damage doesn't leave that cleanly. Malik slides his phone into his pocket. Was that before or after the 5 languages? He asks. Halpern takes the hit. Before, he says. That matters. It doesn't erase anything, but it matters. For the first time all semester, the professor sounds like a man standing without cover. I owe you an apology, he says. Malik waits. Halpern inhales once, then does something difficult. He speaks plainly. I treated your accent as a liability. I confused unfamiliarity with lack of command. That was unfair. And I did it in a room where I had power over you. There it is. Not polished enough to escape. Not abstract enough to hide. A real apology. Not complete, but real. Malik lets the silence sit between them. Then says, You didn't just have power over me. You had influence over the people listening. Halpern nods slowly. Yes. That matters too. Yes. Halpern looks like he wants to say more. Maybe explain. Maybe rescue himself with vocabulary. To his credit, he doesn't. He just says, I'm sorry. Malik believes that he means it. And still, and this is important, meaning it does not make the semester disappear. It does not unfreeze the room from that first presentation. It does not remove the part of Malik that spent a night pricing flights home because one respected man spoke limitation into his future with such calm confidence. Malik nods once. Thank you for saying it. That's all he gives him. Not absolution. Acknowledgement. A week later, Halpern does something nobody expects. He opens seminar by standing at the front of the room with no slides up and no notes in hand. The class senses it immediately. Something is different. He looks at Malik once, then at everyone else. In this course, he says, I have spoken often about persuasion, clarity, and audience trust. Last week, I failed to distinguish between communication standards and my own conditioned preferences. That failure had consequences for one of your classmates. That lands hard. Because professors do not do this. Not often. Not publicly. Not without being forced by reality. Halpern continues, I am not asking you to admire me for noticing it. I am saying it because if we are going to study power, we should be honest when it shows up in our own mouths. The room stays silent. Uncomfortable, yes. Useful, too. A quiet student from Poland talks more in that class than she has all semester. A student from Mississippi jokes, nice to know my accent has been getting domestic immunity. The room laughs. Needed laugh. Then Halpern says, accent is not evidence of weak thought. Familiarity is not the same thing as credibility. If I taught otherwise, I taught badly. He doesn't look at Malik when he says it. Maybe because that part isn't for Malik anymore. It's for the room. And that matters. At the end of class, Halpern asks Malik if he would be willing to comment on multilingual persuasion in diplomatic settings. The whole room waits. Malik thinks for a second, then nods. He speaks for 3 minutes. No victory lap. No anger performance. He talks about what it means to enter a room knowing some people hear your origin before your argument. He talks about code switching, institutional listening, the exhaustion of making yourself legible to people who call the labor professionalism. Then he says the line the class will remember years later. An accent is not a mistake in your voice, he says. It is evidence that your tongue has traveled. Nobody forgets that. Not Sophia. Not the Polish student. Not Carter. Not Halpern. Final grades come out in December. Malik gets an A. He also gets a handwritten note from Dr. Moreno slid under his dorm room door. You were never translated. You were layered. Never flattened for small listeners. He tapes it above his desk. The fellowship changes practical things first. Spring housing is secure. He can reduce his library shifts. He can buy a coat that actually understands winter. And slowly, in ways too subtle for anybody else to chart, he stops apologizing before he speaks. Not outwardly. In posture. In timing. In how long he lets silence belong to him before filling it for other people's comfort. That is what humiliation tries to steal first. Not your opportunities. Your ease. And by senior year, the university asks him to give one of the featured student remarks at graduation weekend. He almost says no. Then he remembers too clearly what it feels like when institutions only seem ready to hear you after you have already done all the hard work in private. So he says yes. He stands in cap and gown before hundreds of people and begins in English. Then, for less than a minute, he greets parents and families in French, Spanish, Arabic, and Wolof too. Not to impress, to include. The crowd reacts exactly how crowds react when inclusion stops being theoretical and becomes audible. A wave of surprise. Then warmth. Then applause. His mother is there, crying carefully in the audience. His sister is filming badly because she is smiling too hard to hold the phone still. After the ceremony, Halpern approaches him once more. No stage now. No audience. Just campus grass, flowers, folding chairs being stacked. I was wrong about you, Halpern says. Malik looks at him, then answers, You were wrong about more than me. Halpern nods. Yes, he says, I was. That should be the final correction. But the real ending doesn't come there. It comes later, when Stanton invites Malik back to campus to give the university's annual Global Communication Lecture. The same flagship event, where polished voices usually explain the world to itself. This time, his name is on the banner. Dr. Malik Diallo. The hall is full. Students, faculty, donors. And in the third row, Richard Halpern, retired now, hands folded over the program. Malik steps onto the stage and opens with one sentence. The first time I stood in front of a room on this campus and spoke from my full voice, someone with authority treated my accent like an obstacle. The hall locks in. Instantly. He speaks for 40 minutes. Not bitterly. Precisely. About accent bias. About institutions that celebrate global perspectives but reward familiar delivery. About how fluency is often recognized too late, after the listener has already decided whether the speaker belongs. Then he steps away from the podium and repeats the same short paragraph in English, French, Arabic, Spanish, and Wolof. Not to impress. To illustrate. To make the room feel its own listening habits. Then he asks, which version sounded most authoritative to you? Hands go up hesitantly. English gets the most. Of course it does. Malik nods. Now ask yourselves the dangerous question, he says. Did you hear authority? Or did you hear familiarity and rename it authority because it made you more comfortable? The room goes still. He has them now. Not as an audience, as a mirror. At the end, the moderator opens the floor for questions. Hands rise. Then one final hand. Third row. Richard Halpern. The room shifts. Enough people know. Enough people remember. Halpern stands slowly, takes the mic, and asks, how does a teacher distinguish between helping a student navigate real audience bias and becoming the bias himself? That is not a safe question. That is a man asking publicly what he once failed to ask privately. Malik looks at him. Really looks at him. Then answers. You start by being honest about which part belongs to the world, he says, and which part belongs to your own ear. Nobody moves. He continues, if you tell a student, some audiences may judge you unfairly. That can be preparation. But if you start speaking to that student as though the unfair judgment is already correct, you stop being a teacher. You become training for the prejudice. Silence. Pure silence. Halpern takes it in. You can see him take it in. After the lecture, when the crowd thins and the room finally loses its public face, Halpern approaches him. No microphone now. No audience. Just two men and everything the years have made visible. You answered the question kindly, Halpern says. Malik gives a small shrug. I answered it clearly. Halpern almost smiles. Then the older man says, I have replayed that semester more times than I care to admit. For a long time I told myself I was preparing students for harsh realities. But what I was really doing, at least in your case, was protecting my own comfort and calling it rigor. That is the most honest thing Malik has ever heard him say. I'm sorry still feels insufficient, Halpern says. It is, Malik answers. Halpern takes that without flinching. Then Malik adds, but insufficient is not the same as meaningless. They stand there for a moment, in a peace that is not friendship and not absolution. Something stranger, more adult, the acknowledgement of damage and of change, without pretending one cancels the other. Finally, Halpern says, you became exactly what I failed to hear. Malik looks at him, then answers with the line that ends the whole story. No, he says, I already was. Because that's the truth, isn't it? He didn't become worthy when the room found out about the 5 languages. He didn't become powerful when the applause arrived. He didn't become real when the professor finally learned how wrong he'd been. He already was. And if this story stayed with you, maybe let it stay there. With that, not on the humiliation, on the part that survived it. And if you've ever had your voice judged before your mind was heard, drop a quiet, I already was, in the comments. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to let somebody else name your worth first.